Welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. eBooks. New eBooks are out this week. So 2 of them, actually. So we sent out an email to everybody yesterday night, and it turned out that our email campaign server at that very moment had an API problem that caused all links in all emails across their entire service to not work, which was a little bit bad luck, but they work now, and they're in the show notes of the podcast. But what do you think about these 2 ebooks?
Well, I think it's going to be really convenient for people to understand our method a little bit more when it comes to learning characters. So they're basically the first one is Chinese Characters 101, which is, I think, 3 or 4 blog post series. And we basically put it together, edited it, made it look a lot nicer, and just put it in a nice ebook form. It's like, hey, you know nothing about Chinese characters, or you want to learn a little bit more, check out this book. So we've got the history of Chinese characters, how they developed, what are they in terms of their equivalent to English and other languages. It's just general introduction. And we've also then put our Hanzi movie method blog series, which I think is 7 parts.
8 parts.
Yeah, but I put 7 parts of it into one nice ebook, again, nicely edited, all in order. Now this one, I thought, we have a subscription service, very reasonable price, $15 a month if you pay 6 months at a time. But for those of people out there that maybe can't afford that, but still want to learn characters, we thought we'll put this together. Just the characters part, obviously the actual subscription, the course that we have includes everything from characters, it includes words, vocabulary, how to learn grammar, everything that will get you to fluency and literacy in Chinese. But just the character aspect, we thought we'd just put this book out there so people can read the book and go off and learn characters on their own if they wanted to. Now, and of course, for people that are already on our course and are learning characters on our course, it's got pretty much all of the little hints and tips that we give throughout all the 300 videos that are in there. But it's all condensed into one sort of easily 参考.
You can just reference it very quickly.
Easily referenced document. So you can just be, okay, I'm having trouble learning this character. I can't be bothered to rewatch that video or find where Luke said that thing. It's all there, all the tips you need to learn characters and make your movie scenes a little bit more memorable as well.
Yeah, so, I think you could think of the Chinese characters one as just what the heck are those things? Because they're not exactly a letter of the alphabet. They're not exactly a word. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. So that's why you need to know some of that stuff. And then the Hanzi movie method, if you understand the theory behind it, it gets you excited about it. And then you can, and also, you can do the first 80 lessons of our course for free, even if you can't afford the regular course. So if you read the free book and you do the first 80 lessons, you'll at least know for sure, okay, this is the method for how to learn a Chinese character. So check those out, links below in the show notes, and you can sign up for those. So,
and of course, the video curriculum version is it's a step-by-step visual guide, so it's actually going to be a lot easier. But this is just for the real autodidacts that don't want to listen to anyone; they just want to go and learn it themselves. It's kind of like what we did in the beginning. So.
Yeah. So, and you could say that that's kind of how we try to approach everything. Is even the beginning of our course, the Mandarin Blueprint Method, we're still saying the first part of the course will give you a lot of direction, but then after that, we're really just giving you, some basic steps, and then you go off on your own. We're still big advocates for self-study.
Yeah.
So
we're all about teaching you how to learn as opposed to directly teaching you. That's more of what we're about. So.
All right. So from now on in these podcasts, when we get to customer service questions, we're going to start the podcast talking about the props and the actors that were suggested each week. Now, this is the last time that I'm going to explain what these are because I recognize that for older listeners of the podcast, it gets annoying to hear the same thing over and over. But of course, we have to be respectful to new listeners of the podcast because every time we have a new podcast, there are new listeners. So if this is your first time listening to the podcast, there in the show notes is a link to a blog post that explains what these sections are all about. And so from now on, we'll just say, hey, if you don't know what we're talking about, go to the blog post below. So I just wanted to let you know that. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about props, which are basically the 3D objects that represent a Chinese character component in our visualization system. So we'll get into that first, then we'll get into actors, and then we'll move on to other relevant questions. So if you want to just skip this part, go ahead in the show notes and you can link to that part of the podcast. So first, we have from Chad on the pick a prop for 走, which the character itself means to walk. So he wants to come up with an object to represent this idea of to walk. And I love his choice here. He went with Philippe Petit. I don't know if I'm saying that right with French pronunciation, but he was the famous tightrope walker featured in the documentary Man on Wire, where he walked between the two World Trade Center buildings in the 70s. It's an amazing documentary. I don't know if you've seen it.
That guy's hilarious. He's just like pulling funny faces throughout the whole thing and like sneaking around.
Yeah.
It's very got a lot of personality, that dude. So that's so he actually, again, they don't. You said 3D objects, but remember they don't have to be just 3D objects. These can be people. They can be animals. I think that's about it.
People, animals, 3D objects.
People always surprise us with different ways of coming up with these props, but as long as they're something you can pick up and touch and interact with, and there's a solid object of some kind.
Exactly.
So
I guess we shouldn't really refer to a person as a 3D object, but really the only thing you have to think about with if you pick a person for a prop is just make sure it's not a contradiction with one of your actors, but you'll know. So it's no problem.
Definitely. The next one's Ryan Smith on character 151, Mo, which is female, mother, sorry. And there's a pick a prop for that. So prop suggestion, similar to Mother Theresa, Mother Superior, played by Maggie Smith in Sister Act. Brilliant.
That's great.
I watched that movie way too much as a kid.
Yeah. I actually watched that a lot too. The Sister Act 2 particularly, because they had Lauryn Hill was like the main.
Is that one of those that's like going to be really cheesy and rubbish if I rewatched it as an adult?
Let's
I feel
just
like
remember
it would be.
well.
Yeah, I remember it being
the
coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
I don't want to ruin that.
Well, she had a great. Lauryn Hill has a great voice, so there's always that. By the way, the reason that you said that Mu is females, because if you're referring to animals, because it was just like I could tell. I was like, oh, you just saw Mu and you thought like Mugo or something like that, which would mean a female dog. There's other words for that in English, but that's why really it means mother. But in animals, you'll say mu and gong to refer to male and female, as opposed to and nan.
Absolutely, yeah. You go up to you got someone's dog or cat, and you go gong the mu that. You're like, what is it? A boy or a girl? Do not do that for humans, please. So
all right.
Another one from Chad here, character 132, bu, as in no or not. This one, he went with Dalton, Patrick Swayze's character in the movie Roadhouse. Oh, he's like a bouncer in that, where he played a bouncer. Yeah. So he's like, no, get out. Or no, your behavior is bad. And he's,
Yeah, I love that too, because there's so much feeling around it for sure. Like, I wanted to get in. No, you're denied. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, very good. So he went for, by the way, he went for the meaning, but you could base it off of the appearance if you wanted to as well. So Jay Anderson on character 22. That's the next one.
Yeah, so this is he's picking a prop for the character that means elder brother or older brother. So he says, we already have mouth and human legs or kid. Why a different prop when they appear together? Is it just to limit props in the future? Yes.
Yes, definitely.
But I see the next character is Dui, which is the same thing but with just horns on the top. So it seems like that could be horns, mouth, legs, as easy as horns plus elder brother. And I have one fewer prop to remember. And with my increasingly good memory, so that's not really a problem. Okay, so but get this, you go one more character beyond this, and you get to shuo. So now you have megaphone, horns, mouth, human legs. Do you see how it starts to get a little bit tenuous? It starts to be like, I can't, because our human short-term memory only has so many like compartments, is the way you could think of it. So it's like, the smartest people in the world, the people with the highest IQ, can hold like 12 disparate things in their short-term memory. I'm pretty sure is what I read about that. And so that means that if they got sent a 12-digit code on their cell phone to open up, their shipping box, or to answer a verification code. There's no strong as I'm thinking all the Chinese words for this. The verification code. Well, they could remember all 12 digits right there. I'm not that smart. I can barely remember 8. So it's like if you chunk things together, then you can remember things much more easily. That's why we do phone numbers in 362-5497 or something like that, right? So that's why you have them chunked. And that's why it's the exact same theory here, which is that if you chunk things together and say, okay, this is mouth and human legs, but let's make it, instead of mouth and human legs, just elder brother, Then the next thing, after the next character, which means it kind of looks like a little devil, you make that a devil, then all of a sudden with shuo, you only have 2 props to remember as opposed to 4. And it gets even crazier if you didn't do this as you go further on.
That's one key aspect of it. Very important. Another key aspect that I think, is it Jay? Yeah, Jay might have been thinking was that, hey, I'm spending this time creating a prop and I'm just using it in one character, and then I'm creating another prop out of that and I'm using it just one. It seems so inefficient. Remember, this is why I was just looking something up on the phone because I had to just check something there. Because learning human legs is going to be used independently as a prop in many other characters, so it's worth learning that, right? Ko as well. But xiong, like older brother, like the ko and the legs together, that will be used in many other characters as just that prop, just that older brother prop. So I've just had to look up a few because I'm not that good, I have to check. So for example, dang as in political party, Kwang, qing kwang de kwang, and zhu as in to pray or to wish someone. So, and then of course, dui will be used in other things apart from shuo, like yue as in happiness, or shui, right? As in shui for tax. Yeah, exactly. So these props, especially the ones earlier on, with very few exceptions, will be used in at least a handful, like several different characters moving on. So it's always, and we take that into account when we create a pick a prop lesson. We don't create a pick a prop lesson unless it's going to be worthwhile to do.
Now, there's sometimes there's a reason why we do it, which is particular to one character, because on the edges of Chinese characters, there are some that are really important, but they don't have a lot of other. They don't have a lot of other. For example. So the point being that when that happens and you run into a character that's very rare, but still, at least the components are rare, but it's still really important, then occasionally we'll say, okay, learn this prop, and you're pretty much only going to use it for this character and maybe one other. But generally speaking, especially at the early stage, you can count on the fact that if you see us saying pick a prop, it's going to be used many times in the future, even if it's not used many times right now. So cool. Great question. All right, next we also have from Jay a few characters previous for pick a prop for R, which was that legs thing we were talking about. He says, Jack from The Incredibles. So many superpowers to play with in future stories. So Jack, was he the one with...
He's the baby, yeah.
The baby,
so why would he choose a baby for R? Well, R means RZ, right? Son or child. So as a pick a prop, we suggest choose some sort of child, but choose one that it jumps out. I believe we suggest child or son? I can't remember.
I think it's child, because really
what about
that's really more the male indication, because it's R and then you have R. So R is the common character amongst boy and girl. So
of course,
so I would say
R.
Probably was child.
Yeah. So Jack. So I chose, for example, Haley Joel Osment from Sixth Sense.
Classic.
He just jumps out, or some people choose Macaulay Culkin. Jay went for Jack from The Incredibles, and a cool thing about that, like he says in the next, so many superpowers to play with. So you can choose people for their personalities that jump out in certain scenes, but sometimes it's cool to choose people for what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, cool. So now we'll switch over to actors, only 2 this week. But again, if you don't know what we're talking about, the blog post is in the show notes below. So first we have from Chad. This is for the actor, which will be a fictional actor for TU. So he went with Tiger Wong, Nicholas, I guess this is a Cantonese way of Nicholas Te's character in the movie Dragon Tiger Gate. So haven't seen that movie, but as usual, Chad usually, these are both from Chad. They're both his martial arts actors that he finds from watching Chinese movies. And that does make it easier because, of course, their names are the same as what you'll have in the actual Mandarin pronunciation. So
yeah, and they can do some cool stuff.
Yeah, and then the other one was Zhou Xun from, I don't know what, Wang Longzhen's character in the series Day and Night. So I haven't seen any of these movies, but, absolutely, that's all good. All right. Next, we have an email from SIDNEY, which I named the podcast after because it got me thinking about how translation should be involved in your Chinese study? Because that's an important question. How much English translation should you use? You know, obviously we have keywords for the characters that we learn that are English, and we have a translation of the definitions of vocabulary words. But like, at what point does it become counterproductive? And so he has asked us a few questions this week. And first of all, Sydney, you gave us a few suggestions that were genuine mistakes that, you know, I just made because I was just being a little bit too careless running through the translations. I remember when I was writing them, I was kind of like, translating is not really all that fun of an activity. So I was just kind of like, all right, next. But so yeah, anytime you catch a mistake like that, absolutely. But there's this sort of thing where when I was translating, I did not translate directly necessarily. I tried to translate as what it actually means, because you know, you can't always translate Chinese and English directly. So let's talk about his email, and then we'll go from there. So he says, I can't see anything about being quote unquote over 2 meters long in this sentence. 它有2米长, which is like an object because you use 它 for it, and it's saying has 2 meters long would be the direct translation, but we don't speak like that in English, right? We don't say it has 2 meters long. You know, it's not how we would say it. We don't use yo in that way. So it is correct to say it's 2 meters, but it's also because it's saying it has 2 meters, you know, theoretically, if it's a little bit over 2 meters, you know, it's not under 2 meters. Let's put it that way. You can't have 2 meters if it's under 2 meters, but you could have 2 meters and be a little bit over. Now, you talked to Nana about this, your girlfriend, and she said, it means 2 meters.
But all things being equal, we probably should have went for it is 2 meters long. But I can imagine it being in certain contexts definitely could be over. So it's like, 你觉得那个有2米长吗? 有. You know, like it has 2 meters, but it could be 2 meters 10, or it could be, you know, it's like
right.
But
so
we should have gone for the more likely translation, probably. But
so yeah,
it can be both. It can be both.
Yeah. He says it is confusing when the translation does not accurately reflect what is written.
I get that. I can understand. I remember being very frustrated by stuff like that.
Yeah. I do get that, and we'll talk about that in a second. So the next one, he says, so this is a really clever sentence written by Annie, and actually we should have given a little bit of a direction here. So the sentence is the same thing happens in, and listen to how I say this, 我的小狗长大了，还长长了. So look at the sentence below, and you'll see that the second half of this sentence is the same 2 characters, but with 2 different pronunciations. So 长 means to grow up, and both of these words we have 长大, which means to grow up from being a little dog to a big dog, or a kid growing up to be an adult. What it is saying it's growing with the result of being big, da. And then the second one is 长长. So that's growing.
The important thing is to see here is 还长长了. This 还 is also, it means also.
Right.
It's also growing longer. Oh, sorry, it has also grown longer. That's the alert. It's like a change, right?
And this is so cool of a sentence because I originally thought it was 长长 was the second bit, but I realized, it can't be because the l at the end doesn't make sense with 长长. If it were 长长, it would be d, because you can, with adjectives, with single character adjectives, you can say 他高高的, because Luke's quite tall, so you can say 他高高的, or
红红的.
Yeah, it could be any
red or whatever. But hands up, we should have definitely, like, Phil didn't spot that first of all.
It's a great sentence.
But again, we should have also, despite the fact that you've learned the Zhang or Chang character, we should have put the pinyin in there so you can see what Annie had done there, and the translation is technically wrong. So thank you, Sydney, for pointing that out, because that's actually a really cool sentence that's going to waste because we got the wrong translation.
But the one thing that's really important about that, though, is that it actually, one of the reasons that this came up is because Chang, this character, is one of the few characters in our order that has a very high frequency second pronunciation. So usually there's about 20% of all characters that have a second pronunciation, but a small percentage of those are also high frequency. So you might have a character that's said one way, but its second pronunciation is like HSK 6 level, you know, so it's not really necessary to learn early on. This is not the case with Chang. The second pronunciation, Zhang, means to grow essentially. So grow is obviously an important thing. You can 长胡子, which means grow beard, right? So it's like you can 长头发, which means grow hair. So it's a very high frequency second pronunciation, and Annie did a great job of showing how you could use them even together in the same word. So that's cool. I've never,
yeah, exactly.
So
I think that we should definitely have a look at that a bit deeper for the course in general, because one of the things that we don't want to have to make the users of the course do is to say, because this is not necessary, we didn't need to do it. And we didn't have us to guide us through, which was, this like you've just learnt the character Chang, but it also has a different pronunciation. Let's go back into your memory palace and create a new movie for the same character. We don't bother doing that because the whole point of the movie method is to build a foundational knowledge, and then you learn other pronunciations through context. Right. But I think that we should at least maybe think about pointing it out more clearly, like 多音字, like we'll definitely think about that in the future, I think.
Well, so what's kind of cool about this too is that since they happen to have the same final, these two pronunciations, you could imagine that you're standing in like you have Charlie Chaplin in the kitchen of, for me, ANG was the second apartment I lived, or third apartment I lived in Beijing. And so I could imagine that Charlie Chaplin's in the kitchen there, and then George Clooney is in the bedroom there. And so George Clooney maybe is originally he's quite small and he grows up, and then maybe Charlie Chaplin extends his neck outside of the kitchen to have a really long neck to look at George Clooney growing up or something. And you could have because they happen to take place in the same set, a scene that's kind of mixed together like that.
I actually did. I was going to say, that you've just reminded me, I used to do something very similar, but more action-packed. I used to basically have, I don't remember which characters I did this for, because I stopped doing it after a while because so few of them, like you say, were both relevant, both pronunciations, so it wasn't an issue. But I started doing it like this. I'd have, just take yours for example, Charlie Chaplin. I would have then Charlie Chaplin jump through a wall, and then he would land into the other set, or the same set or whatever, but or that other room, and he would smash through the wall, and then he would do another scene. With the other actor. So like Charlie Chaplin and George Clooney sort of doing it together, something like that, like where it's more connected through like more visual intensity. But I did that for a while, and I was like, this is not worth it, because I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem remembering it. Yeah,
the further away they are in frequency, the less it matters to do. But when they happen to be quite close, and I mean, it also happens in character number 5 of the course, gan and gan, which are, one means dry, very high frequency, you need to know how to say dry, and gan means to, like, it's not the only way to say do, but it's do for like things like work, especially, and so and also you could say 你在干嘛, which just means like, what are you up to? And so it's a really important character in both cases, but it doesn't happen that much. Now, continuing, he said, I know I must sound really pedantic, but when you're trying so hard to learn/acquire a language, these scare quotes paraphrase type translations make things more difficult. There are a number of them I have experienced in Anki. Please don't see this as anything more than a comment, which I hope is helpful. I still think Mandarin Blueprint is the best course available. Thank you, as ever, Sydney. Now, this is what I got thinking about here. The point that Sydney's making here, I understand, and it was actually something that I considered quite a bit when I was thinking about, should I write these translations directly, or should I write what they really mean? And so I decided to go with the second for this reason. If you imagine that you have meaning, so like if there's a sentence or a word or a character that has meaning, there's a code or something you could think of that expresses that meaning. And one code is called English and one code is called Chinese. But it's almost like a triangle, right? The most efficient way to get to acquiring a new code, a new language, is to go directly from the meaning to the code, if possible. So if I can, this is really easy to do with nouns. So if you go around your house and you put Chinese with a Post-it note on the various things that are, I put on here, 话筒 or microphone, and I know, okay, that's a microphone. It's automatic visualization, right? Because you're looking at it, you can get the connection between the visual sense and the word right from there. So it's direct, which is nice. But with words, a translation is usually, it's helpful. It's like a cheat sheet. It's like kind of a quick little, oh yeah, I already know that. But once you start to get to sentences, Chinese does not directly translate to English well a lot. It's just like doesn't really, if you were to say, it has 2 meters long, it's like, that's not what we would say. So you have to adjust it. And then when you adjust it, then you also want to take into consideration, well, what does it actually mean? Like, what context would you use this? Is there some other thing?
Into personal interpretations, and that's obviously really room for differences there of opinion and stuff. So,
but we encourage you to stop relying on translations as soon as possible, which we start doing in level 25, by the way. We stop giving you an English translation because at that point you've seen enough Chinese sentences that it's like, well, you don't have to rely on it. So the reason we think about it like give the meaning, not the direct translation, is because that's what language acquisition is about. It's just about look at this thing and understand what it means. As soon as you understand what it means, it falls into the realm of an understandable message. Every understandable message contributes to your language acquisition. That's sort of the Stephen Krashen linguist way of thinking about it. So that was what I was going for with that, and I know that it's sacrificing to some degree that sense of security, I guess, you can get from the translation. It's like, oh, well, maybe I don't totally understand the sentence, but I can look at the English and totally get it. And then sometimes if the English doesn't map on perfectly, it can be like, oh, well, is this confusing me more? So what I would encourage you to do, Sydney, is when you see that, see if you can just understand it in the way that the Chinese code looks at the meaning directly. You know, they look at this thing is 2 meters. You know, what would that possibly mean? If you didn't have the English translation, could you still figure out what it means? And that's what I would suggest for that. And
I would also just like to add on to that a lot of the way although we completely believe in the research that backs all this stuff up, and it's heavily cited, and we've used it ourselves to acquire Chinese very quickly and enjoyably. A lot of the way we're executing this course, you know, it's best guess based on the research and our own experience. So, like, for example, how exactly we execute what Phil's saying, or when, like, whether it's level 25 is appropriate to start doing certain things, or level 30. A lot of the stuff we're trying out, and it's not perfect. So we'd like you to continue, you know, if you have an issue understanding certain points, if you find yourself confused at any point, we still want everyone to let us know, you know, because there might be the fact that we have got a little translation mistake, or maybe we shouldn't introduce this certain way of doing things yet. Maybe it should be a couple of levels down the line, or maybe it should be in a slightly different way. So this course is in some ways it's quite experimental, and that's why it's groundbreaking. I think, you know, it's also very helpful, but it's there's still room for change. You know, so please let us know about your own experiences with like Sydney, for example, especially when we develop from different phases onto other phases. So, for example, from words to sentences to phrases to opinions to dialogues to stories. Like, if you're noticing a huge jump in difficulty, you know, it's kind of like game testing. You know, I like to play computer games probably a little bit too much, but there's a huge part of game development which is testing, where they literally just have people play for hours and hours and hours and give feedback based on all the different aspects of the game. And this is a game in itself, and this course. So there's still room for improvement, and I'm sure. So please, just get in touch.
Absolutely. And those, that's a really particular, we can get even specific with that question. For those of you on level 25, it's either that it's level 25, we stop giving translations, or that's the last level where you have translations, but you'll see. And if you reach that point and you go, oh my gosh, the fact that there's no translations now is making this really hard, please let us know, because it's not like we couldn't just add them in. It's not a big deal. It's just we made a conscious decision to say, okay, they've seen about over 1,000 sentences at this point. They should be able to kind of have a sense of what things mean. And it might be, but I will say this though, go through at least one full level before you come to that conclusion, because it might be that the jump in difficulty at first feels hard, but then when you realize, oh, I stopped relying, maybe I was relying too much on the English translation, because after doing another, say, 40 sentences, you kind of have it down. So that would be, but I completely agree with Luke. I mean, 25 was kind of, to some degree, I was like, well, they've done about 1,000. Right, they've done about 1,000 sentences. Seems like this should be the right time to do it, but
part of the reason why we made this course is because we find that native teachers, or even non-native people with other products out there, there's a lot of things they don't get, or they've forgotten about what it's like to actually learn Chinese and the struggles that we face, right? So what this course is trying to fix that. and trying to get in the minds of you learning Chinese and trying to figure what would you want based on our own experiences. But it's kind of a catch-22 in a way, because we're now advanced learners. We have been for a while. So we even though I think we're better than most at putting our mind into putting ourselves into your shoes.
Sure.
We're still not perfect at it because we're not beginners anymore.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be perfect being able to do that. So
yeah.
let us know if you've got any struggles.
Cool.
And we'll very likely address them and make tweaks and stuff like that.
Awesome. So this next question comes from Yarden on character number 162, Tai, which is the new vocabulary unlocked lesson, which is tai, which means wife. And his question is it also used in daily life or just in books? And the answer to this, and I know why he's asking this, because there's a couple other words for wife that people will use. The most spoken one is 老婆. That's very spoken. You won't see that one in speech or in written form unless it's a dialogue between characters in a fiction or something like that.
By the way, it doesn't mean old woman.
Yeah.
Lao is like 老师 or 老外. It's like Lao is like it's actually a term of respect in a way,
right?
Depending on your tone of voice. So po just means woman. It's just a word for woman, and Lao. It's basically just my woman.
Yeah,
my respected woman, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's a prefix version, so I'll link to that below.
Yeah.
And by the way, we also had I'll link to the vocabulary article that relates to why there would ever be a word 长大 or 长长, but I'll do that. That was from Sydney's email. Now, Yarden, when he asked this, so there's 老婆, which is the very spoken way. There's 妻子, which is kind of, I would say, sort of in between. And then you have tai, which is the most formal, but it's still used in day-to-day life. Absolutely. It's just, again, it's what situations are formal and what are not.
I would say tai is most commonly used as saying just Mrs. So Mrs. Smith would be Smith tai, or Mr. would be Smith 先生. It's just 太太 and 先生 sort of. And but I've heard people say, 我的先生, my husband, as well as 我的丈夫 or 我的老公. They're all sort of interchangeable in a way.
Yeah, I mean, Yo Lao Shi always used to say 我的太太. Now,
right.
He's a teacher at a university, but he did use to always say 太太. And, so it's like, it is the most formal, but again, the red line you want to draw between spoken and written Chinese is more that spoken can't be used in written, less than written can't be used in spoken. So if you see something that's quote unquote written Chinese, there's some parts of it that are exclusively used in written, but it's pretty rare that it's like, no, you can't say this in life. Just be aware that if it's written, it's always going to come off more formal. And in the case of wife or husband, I mean, they're just such common words. I feel like it's just variety to some degree.
Yeah.
People just want to not say the same word all the time. So,
but just for simplicity, go for 老婆 or 老公 when you're speaking. Yeah, just as if you're picking one to go for.
Yeah.
We've got an email here from Chad. Quick question for 不过. It says that is spoken, the spoken but. Now, can 但是 also be used in spoken form? Again, this is similar.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain I heard 但是 used for but in the new show I'm watching. I think I replied to this. I've answered this question a couple of times in the past, actually.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's the same answer we just gave to Yarden. 不过 you'll use in speech if you at any time, but you won't use it in writing. If you're writing formally, you won't use 不过 in writing. But there also is a little bit of a difference in meaning. So you're going to say?
Yeah, so I mean, 但是 is actually, and you can sort of use this to use the 2 fourth tones to remember, like 但是 it's a bit more unexpected, or it's a bit more, what would you say, exaggerated in its meaning. So it's like, so I imagine like Columbo coming in, but just one more thing. Let's be like 但是呢, it's more sort of strong there. 不过 is sort of like in the middle of in the middle of something.
The way I remember 不过 being a little bit less, because there is a slight difference in meaning, which is more to do with the tone of the words, and that's that 不过 is like maybe you're using 不过 if you want to be nicer, I guess. So like maybe, for example, you're in a situation where you're giving somebody some slightly negative news, but you're going to tell them like why you're going to fix it. So it's like I can't make dinner right now, but I'll make it in 15 minutes. Like it's kind of like it's more positive, right? Yeah. And so 但是 is not necessarily negative, but it's like more likely to be used in a negative context.
Yeah, and then you got 可是 as well, but that's sort of more soft, like 不过, I guess.
Yeah. I would agree.
But yeah, that's the two main differences. There are a few more differences between these, but we don't need to go into that right now. Just for spoken, that'll do.
Yeah.
The next one here is from William EDMEADES, or EDMEADES. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Hi guys, just a quick question regarding memory palaces. Would it be a good idea to increase the intensity of the memory palace as the meaning of the word intensifies? For example, the memory palace for hate be more intense than the memory palace for dislike. I think that will naturally happen based on the keyword definition, right? So, I mean, especially when it comes to more abstract words like hate or need or want, so that's a good example, right? So how do you differentiate between need and want? Well, would that be intensity, or would that be the acting skills, like the expressions on the face of the person, the actor doing it? So
what immediately came to mind when I read this email, because I mean, when you think of the memory palace as it applies to our method, it's mostly the sets, right? So I imagined, for example, the Chinese word for hate is 恨. So that would be in the EN set. And for me, that was my second apartment in Beijing. So if I'm imagining myself entering the bathroom because it's fourth tone, I can kind of like say, okay, what do I associate with hatred, and how could that be, how could I make the room look more like that? And I just kind of naturally come into a more like hellish sort of despair type of situation. So maybe the bathroom hasn't been cleaned for like years, and it's just whatever. There's just sort of, there's a darkness to it. And then, of course, you still have to have your actor and the props interact, but that's a good way to set the scene. You will set the scene that way, and it's more likely to be memorable. So, because the memory champions who are the best, they always say that the most memorable mnemonics are really more emotional than they are visual. I mean, it's like the visual is obviously an element, but if you can get the emotion across, then it's just quicker into your long-term memory comparatively.
And that would just be so natural to you. So when I think of the word dislike, I think of someone trying to concentrate and a child sort of running around being naughty, and then just like, ugh. But when I think of hate, I mean, it's obvious to everyone, right? You think of the word hate, I think of screaming in someone's face, much more intense naturally. So for this, I'd say don't worry about trying to make it less or more intense intentionally. Just think about what the word means. How does it manifest itself? And the scenes will naturally write themselves.
Yeah. Just know like what restrictions there are and what there aren't. Like, don't add new foreign objects into the room, because that might confuse you with props. But if you want to change the air of the room, the aura, the background music that's playing, like any of that stuff, go for it. But as Luke says, let your mind naturally manifest that stuff.
This one, Abigail on character 45, hua, as in to transform the make a movie. Why is the stroke order different for qi, that's number 7, here? That's basically looks like the right side component of hua than it was in the previous character. So I answered this actually. The stroke order is the same, as in the order you write the strokes. You still write the horizontal stroke first, or the sort of bent stroke or whatever. But the strokes just are different in this case, and it's something to do with how they're written. So you still, with hua, for example, you still do the horizontal stroke word, but it's like pier. From your point of view, it goes like that, down. Whereas for qi number 7, you do the upward sort of slanting horizontal stroke first.
Left to right.
So both the horizontals, but they're just different strokes in themselves. And it's whenever that happens, it might be confusing, but it's always to do with how to make the character write smoother. So with hua, it's one, it flows easier when you write.
Exactly.
That's why they do that. Next one here, Julian LAFFEY on character 274. So making really good progress. Wan, as in to finish, make a movie. As if Chinese isn't hard enough. So many homophones.
Yes, that is the reason why the Hanzi movie method is the best, because it just sorts that all out, right? Because you've got the actor and the set in the room of the set, you know exactly what the pronunciation is, and then you use the props and everything to make the meaning. But this is the biggest problem with using characters as a language with so few syllables, is that it's just so easy to get confused from an auditory perspective. If you just listen to people, it's like, oh my gosh, how many times did they say one? And actually, this particular one, one means to finish. If you say 完了, that means that you have finished something. And it also means to die because, it's like, okay, 我完了. It's like, okay, I'm done. Or he died. It's like a kind of tactful way to say died.
You can even say 玩完了.
Yeah, right. So that's why 玩 is the one verb that allows for that 儿化. And it's very common. Most, even in the South, they'll often say 玩. And it's because they don't want to say, 我快要完了 and mean play because they'll be like, oh, maybe
do you want to go out and die? I'm just kidding. People do say that, but it's just this is what we'd actually found this out somewhere. We'd heard about this. That's the only verb that has the R on it, but might be wrong. But I think
I would imagine that's probably what it is. But I guess it is a little bit of speculation. But still, that is an issue. But the Hanzi method does completely solve that problem.
Yeah, and we said this, I believe, last episode about developing your vocabulary. These homophones will not become an issue once you start to really develop. So once you
really isn't an issue,
especially after you finish these 1,000 words in the course at the moment. We'll soon be expanding it, but once you finish the 1,000 words, I think that's enough of a foundation to start really not having those issues anymore. Another one from William on compound final UEI for 对不对 or 对不起. That's from the pronunciation mastery course. As a retail worker, I like to talk some Mandarin to my Chinese customers. Would it be acceptable to use 对不起 when I knock something over, or if I get some product info wrong, or should I be using 抱歉 instead? Now, I actually answered this as well because I've actually worked in retail, and I guess it depends, but 对不起 is fine. 不好意思 is also fine, but 对不起 is, I guess, is stronger. 不好意思 is sort of like, you're trying to get past someone in the street or whatever. I don't know. But 抱歉 is very formal, and it can be used definitely. But I've heard it used a lot in, say, hotels. When I've stayed in hotels, they say 抱歉, to say sorry, or in writing and by a text or something like that. But and so you can use both 对不起 and 抱歉 and 不好意思. You can do all three if you want in your work environment. But I always find that 对不起 would be like more personable, I guess, less formal. So it depends on what sort of retail store you work at. But I remember I used to talk to my people, like my customers, like I would talk to anyone. It's more natural that way. So 对不起 would have been my choice. But don't worry about that sort of stuff, really. I mean, you got Chinese customers; they're going to be amazing at speaking Chinese anyway. So that's awesome.
And I always like to think about with 对不起, what is the structure of that word? Well, it's just like in the prefix, which is 老婆 we talked about earlier. Well, there's also an infix called with 的 or 不, and so it's basically you could say 对得起, 对得起, and that would mean that you basically, it's like 对不起 is like I haven't done right by you.
Well, literally it means I can't 对 you, I can't face you. Like 对不起, like 不起, this ending is basically saying I can't do the thing that I said, so I can't face you. So you can that sounds very dramatic in itself, doesn't it? Whereas 不好意思 is more like bad meaning. I'm a little bit embarrassed about that, but as opposed to I can't face you.
And you can actually say 我对不起你. Which would mean, so like you just add it into a sentence. 我对不起你. It's not exactly saying sorry. That's saying, it's kind of like saying I didn't do right by you. Right. And so, that's the format there is that theoretically you could say, I've never heard anybody say 对不起, but theoretically you could putting the infix in means I did face you successfully, but you 对得起, or I can't face you successfully, 对不起, right? But it just kind of translates to sorry in the end of the day, if you say it by itself. All right. This is a cool one. I never thought about this.
So it's again by William on compound final A for 这个, 那个, and 哪个 for the pronunciation mastery again. Could the reason for J to be colloquial, because you can say 这个 or you can say 这个, and they're the same meaning, but generally J or NÉIGE or NÉIGE is the spoken, the more colloquial way. Is that because it sounds like a mashup of J and I? It would make sense considering that the Y in I is silent and it can only be used when counting as well.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know, but it would make sense to me because I mean, you can say 这一个东西, like whatever, so you can put that is something you could say grammatically, and so I wonder, maybe there's a character 崩, which is a combination of 不 and 用, so 不用崩, and actually the actual character itself is 不 on top and 用 on the bottom. And so, like, that type of thing happens. So it's not unprecedented. I don't know the answer, like, if it's true, but I would not be surprised. Do you know if that's true?
No idea.
Yeah,
no idea.
Yeah. Interesting.
Next one, Genesis DAVAL SANTOS on ANNY 老师 reviews simple finals O and U. Again, lots of pronunciation mastery comments this week. For the last part, 不, why is it in second tone? Even her pronunciation, I think, might be missing some rules or meaning.
Yeah, so this is just the tone Sandy rule for 不, because I mean, we won't go into it in total detail here, but I've linked to it already in the show notes for this episode. But essentially, whenever 不 comes before another fourth tone, it switches to second tone to make it flow a bit better. And it really flows with 不 because it's a vowel into another vowel, and there's not really a space between them. It's not really like 不, it's just 不, right?
Tone Sandy is some very basic rules that you need to grasp, and we go into it in a lot of detail in the now free pronunciation mastery course. So check it out.
Yeah, and check out that article to get right to that specific point. Okay. Next, we have a question from Jeffrey Herzog from Facebook, and he said he's referring to an Anki card within the course, and he listened to the two voices and how it seems like they're a little bit different. And so the picture of this card is in the show notes. It says, on this card, the male says g higher than the first ma in mama. And the female says g lower than the first ma in mama. So I was wondering if it was just a regional or gender thing, or how I should pronounce it how I should pronounce it as a 几个妈妈. Right. So, Luke, this sounds like your specialty.
Whoa, this sounds like
it's a very detailed question.
It is indeed. I mean, I'd have to listen to the audio. Can I? Is there any way?
I guess we could try that. That's just a picture. So I guess we could pull up the card. But just the thing is, though, I think right off the bat, my first thought about this is that when you have two Chinese people who are saying these things slightly differently, you're reaching a level of detail in the pronunciation that is, I don't think, worth focusing on too much.
You just like you saying that exactly, because I was we watched a video just before the podcast. There was some British guy saying Mandarin, and I was like, why do people say Mandarin? It's Mandarin. But I might be wrong, right? It's just the way I say it. So I don't know. I think getting to that level is possibly a little bit, as much as I admire it, it's a little bit too much analysis. Perhaps. I mean.
And also, fifth tone really, I mean, again, I don't even like to call it fifth tone because it's variable. It's not, like the other tones are fairly consistent, with the exception of third tone is sometimes longer and then it's sometimes small. But like, generally speaking, they're pretty consistent. The fifth tone, it's so variable that if there's a difference in how two people say it, it's like it could even be at the level of personality. You know what I mean? It could just be like, oh, this guy is an outgoing person, and so he tends to articulate certain sounds, in a tone of voice that's more, because we think of Chinese tones as being specific, but that doesn't mean that tone of voice is not a thing. You know what I mean? Like, because tone of voice kind of at the level of the sentence, right?
Yeah. Again, good ear. You must have a good ear, so that means you're probably going to do fine. So, yeah, don't worry about that sort of level, because I mean, I'm just saying, to be fair to you though, I'm just saying don't worry about it because I can't answer the question.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing though is that with fifth tone, just mimic Chinese people, really.
And also, they're going to be right. I mean, even if they're going to be right. So.
Here's what you should take from that. Actually, this is what you should take from that. You can do both because they're both Chinese native speakers and they're both trying to speak proper Mandarin, right? So like the fact that they both came up with different pronunciations means that you can do both. right? So you think of it like that. All right.
All right, nice one. So we've got a couple of make a movie, so basically movie scenes to finish off this list of comments here. So as always, we've got Chad here with another, well, I assume it's going to be a really good one. So the location, the set is his old trailer in the backyard because it's a fourth tone. Billy Zane is the actor as he appeared in the movie Sniper. And props, Chuck Norris as in the male component because he's the man. And Razorblade and Ho as in the object, not the person. Okay. So Billy Zane has arrived at my trailer looking for a reported sniper in the area. He said he needs to search the area, but is unfamiliar with the forest and needs a way to find his way back. My neighbor, Chuck Norris, hearing all the ruckus, comes out with his razor blade as he is still shaving. We tell him the situation, and suddenly he extends his neck while still shaving and does a quick search of the area to make sure it's safe. He then digs a hole with the garden hoe, places the hoe in the ground with the handle sticking up, and attaches a homing beacon to it. He tells Billy Zane that he can track the signal using his phone to know where we are located at, so he can meet back up with his extraction team.
Okay.
Wowzers. Yeah, because Zai is to be located or located. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so using a homing beacon. And it's sort of MacGyver. I use the word. I've never actually seen the show MacGyver. I use the MacGyver as a verb because I watched The Simpsons a lot. They used to refer to the verb. Anyway, so basically using these objects in a creative way. These props.
Yeah. I love the GPS. Homing device. It's very related to location. It's going to have to GPS is not that he doesn't actually say GPS in here, but it's that general idea. It's like a homing device gets to that specific point, and then it's going to use satellite imagery or whatever to find exactly where that is. That's a perfect association, I think. And
I should say to you guys as well, you do not need to make it this elaborate. If you're getting intimidated by listening to Chad's scenes, you're like, wow, this is I can't think of something like that. Don't worry. The most simple, I could break this down into a much simpler scene. It'd be just as effective, Chuck Norris. Okay, so Chuck Norris, he wants to find something. Doesn't even know what it is, but it doesn't matter. He needs to find something, but he can't figure out where it's located. So he takes a razor blade, attaches it to a hole, and it becomes like one of those water diviners. And he uses that little contraption, and he finds it.
Yeah,
done.
Sure.
As long as you don't have to again be as much as I love Chad's scenes. You don't have to be that elaborate. You can just be like. Use your we always say acting skills, don't we? We always say use gestures and facial expressions and really bad acting, actually exaggerated movements and stuff like that to show the meaning just as easily. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right, fine. We'll end with Ryan Smith, and so this is the character Shi, which means to recognize or to with knowledge in this case. Yeah. So he says this is the make a movie for that. So the kitchen of his childhood home. So that's because Shi doesn't really have a final. It's not Shao or Shan. It's just Shi by itself. Second tones, kitchen, childhood home. Sean Connery is the actor. So that's because SH sounds like Sean. And then the props are a megaphone, which is the left side component that means speech. Megaphone's related to speech. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, because he's the only hope of Princess Leia in A New Hope. And so I love it. It's a perfect thing because that's the right side component means only. All right. In this scene, Sean Connery is acting less like a real Sean Connery and more as the SNL celebrity Jeopardy portrayal. Yeah, I've seen that. It's pretty funny.
No idea.
It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. It was always when Will Ferrell was playing Alec Trebek. All right, so Obi-Wan comes into the kitchen, hood up and acting mysterious. Okay, I can imagine that. He starts to tell Sean Connery that he plans to share some of the secret knowledge of the Jedi when Connery interrupts him to shout hi through a megaphone, which is exactly how that particular SNL Sean Connery would act. Annoyed, Obi-Wan tries to continue, but his overly mystical dialogue keeps getting interrupted by Sean Connery playing with the megaphone. Eventually, Obi-Wan just gets too pissed off and says, "Forget this, just use this for your secret knowledge, and throws a phone with the Wikipedia app open on the kitchen counter. Okay, nice.
Yeah. He added the Wikipedia thing in there. I mean, you're probably a lot of people would just forget the Wikipedia page thing, but the idea of the phone is the source of knowledge, right? That's awesome, right? Just smartphone, just use a smartphone. Just go for the modern version.
And just in case you thought that it was some other use of a smartphone, I'll put Wikipedia on the front page
just in case. I like that.
That's great. That's great. By the way, so we have these two scenes, one from Chad and one from Ryan, and these two guys have given us so much great feedback and shared a lot of stories. So Ryan, if you're watching this, we would love to do a case study with you like we did with Chad in podcast 13. Mm-hmm. So get in touch, contact@mandarinblueprint.com, which actually reminds me, this is a bit of a news. We have 2 new email addresses to get in touch with us. So if you have a question about anything really, you can send your message to contact at mandarinblueprint.com, contact@mandarinblueprint.com. And if you have a question specific to the podcast, you can send that to podcast@mandarinblueprint.com. So please do that, and we'll before we had a support email, but now it's contact or podcast@mandarinblueprint.com. Did you want to add this one in here too?
Just quickly, I can't help it. Sorry guys, but I just wanted to add this because we just got this from William. We've read a couple of his stories or props or whatever today. So he just sent us this lovely comment. I just want to read it. Hey guys, 2 exclamation marks. Oh man, you guys rock. Another 2 exclamation marks. I'm so glad I found you on Reddit. You have literally changed the way I think about Chinese, and I can't thank you enough. Smiley face. You can so tell how much time and effort you put into this course, and it shows. You guys are also so inspirational and motivated, and just good people as well who produce gold standard content. I'm recommending this course to anyone who wants to learn Chinese. Everything is immaculate. Well, I mean, there were a few hiccups with spelling errors along the way, and your watermark logo covering up the text on the screen. Other than that, 12 out of 10 rating from me. Keep up the good work. So thanks very much for that.
Well, that's great.
And we got something good out of posting on Reddit.
Hey!
It wasn't all pain and suffering. That's good.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, so as per usual, guys, we got 2 free new ebooks out. One thing we never ask for, but would be really helpful, is rating the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify, wherever you find podcasts. Sending in your questions to podcast@mandarinblueprint.com. We've got a blog that we update 2 or 3 times a week. We have a lot of stuff. We have, of course, the free trials of the course, which are always in the show notes right at the top. And
pronunciation mastery for free. Check that out.
As always, still nobody has taken us up on this offer, but if you want to take a little video of yourself trying to say something in Chinese at any level, including just one syllable, if you want to say, am I saying this syllable correctly, and send us that, we'll correct it or tell you you're getting it right. A word, a sentence, or a full story in phase 4 and phase 5 of the course. We would love that. That would be great to get an analysis of that and give you some pointers on how you can pronounce things a little bit better and sound more native. So please send those in to contact@mandarinblueprint.com if you'd like. So thanks very much, and we'll see you. Anything else you want to say this week?
No, I'm all good. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
See you soon.